I'm Nate Awney, and our guest today is Clyde Boyer, who I first met back in March of 2015, and we started working together in January of this year on the texascourses.org open edX site. And today the site has over 32,000 registered users and is serving over 15,000 active users per month. A little bit about Clyde. Clyde is on the advisory board for South by Southwest EDU. He sits on the IMS Global Advisory Council. He's the author of Harnessing the Power of the Web and the CIO of Trinity Education Group, which is a consultancy that creates accessible learning environments for K-12 business and continuing education programs. He's been working with the Texas Education Agency, or TEA for short, on an exciting project to deliver professional development courses to the 320,000 teachers in the state of Texas. And today he's going to give a short presentation and tell us how that project came to be, what challenges he's encountered along the way, and why Open edX was a good fit for this project. And when he's done with that, I'm going to ask a few questions for Clyde, and then we'll open it up to questions from you, the audience. And please be thinking about your questions as he's giving his presentation, and you can type those questions into the question box, which is on your screen. And then at the end of the presentation, there's going to be a short poll that we ask people to fill out, just answering a few questions about, what types of webinar topics you'd like to see in the future. So with that, please welcome Clyde Boyer from Trinity Education Group.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here today. I wanted to give you a little bit of backstory. We only have a limited amount of time, so I just want to make sure you get the overall picture. Texas Gateway, as it stands today, is an evolution from an older project which was called Project Shared Texas. And it was its purpose was to provide online professional development resources to all Texas teachers. How they went about it was there was limited success, partly because of the technical decisions that they had made, partly it was timing and rollout, and if anybody has been part of a statewide implementation or rollout before, they know all the challenges that are at play. Often you're damned if you do, damned if you don't when you roll something out at the state level. But the usual suspects for a failed or kind of a less than expected rollout primarily were user dissatisfaction. The platform that was chosen to deliver courses to the state was a traditional LMS that was Frankensteined into working with the large number of teachers that were available in the state. Also, something to know: Texas is has 1,200 independent school districts. Each one of them kind of uniquely have their own culture and approach to doing things. So rolling something out to 1,200 different districts is no easy task. If your technology platform doesn't allow for flexibility or ability to work at a local level, it's doomed. So one of the issues was the form factor of the traditional LMS. It was complex UI. It was aligned to traditional academic calendars. Really didn't fit to how districts wanted to use it at the local level. So what happened is there's just a lack of adoption at a local level. Scalability issues were they were fraught with outage times. If more than a couple of teachers were banging on at the same time, there seemed to be issues, which led to implementation issues and then trust issues overall. And finally, it was a proprietary solution, which had some downstream effects that nobody really was aware of when they made the decision initially, but it definitely came back to haunt them later on. The TEA had rolled out this program with a lot of fanfare and low adoption, so we were brought on board to address that. And we took an approach that we have utilized for some time: less is more. We wanted to simplify how users interact with the system, and we always use this kind of metric. If the value derived from the product must be greater than the effort in accessing the product. So we wanted to look for simple solutions. We broke out functionality. There's a number of, this kitchen sink approach. We really looked at what were the core requirements and features of an application to deliver this professional development statewide. Broke functionality out into single-purpose applications. Existing already, the state had a publishing platform that they weren't going to move away from. we were able to continue to use that publishing platform and converted content to OLX, transformed content to OLX, and then was able to import that into OpenEdX. This allowed the TEA to maintain control of their publishing platforms and leverage the simplicity of the OpenEdX platform. So, one of the primary, we had a number of different metrics that we had to hit, and looking at different platforms that were available. Scalability was one, and we recognized from the beginning, LMSs, traditional LMSs, are not built for scale. They're built really for local implementations. There are ways to make them scale, but it takes a lot of work. You have to scale horizontally to make this successful, where OpenEdX was built for scalability from the very beginning. We also believed that open platforms was important, and this was critical because the proprietary solution that was used before, they were no longer able to deliver services. And because of that, the state had no way of accessing their content, their resources, things that they thought they had purchased or had ownership of, they no longer did because the platform was closed and proprietary. We were also looking for a larger OpenEdX community and their ability to, I think, participate in, our team would like to be able to share, contribute back with the work that we have done, and we like that as part of the OpenEdX community. All boats, float up together. One of the main things for why we chose OpenEdX is that it was a familiar UI for many teachers. It was almost like, in fact, I would say that the majority of the teachers that had taken courses were familiar, had already taken courses on edX or MIT or one of the large MOOCs, and for them it was a fairly familiar kind of a UI. And as I said before, OpenEdX was a critical piece in the larger PD publishing ecosystem. So what does that mean? So we made this choice. We started working with Appsembler back in January. Just to give you a little background, before we worked with Appsembler, we decided to take on implementing OpenEdX ourselves. And we have a very capable, competent team. We've got a really great team of developers. But this isn't their competency. Their competency is building out applications. And so working with somebody like Appsembler has allowed us to leverage what we do best and then partner with somebody that helps us scale on the other side. And it was one of the better decisions that we've made as we roll out Texas Gateway. But to kind of talk a little bit about the success story, we really didn't know what changes would take place. We had an idea that simplicity and less is more is better, but we didn't know what that would mean. But within the first 8 months of implementation, as Nate was saying, we're now approaching 40,000 teachers. Prior to implementing OpenEdX, usage totals didn't exceed 2,500 for the previous 2 years. And I do believe that a large part of this is due to the ease of use of the platform, and which really, if you think about implementation costs, if you try to implement statewide an application that has a certain level of complexity, all implementation will, for the most part, will stall. You really have to make that application as easy as possible to ensure the greatest adoption, and we found that to be the case with OpenEdX. We're offering over 80 courses. Because of the OLX export that we generated, we're able to publish courses almost at will to OpenEdX, and that has allowed us to leverage existing content and scale. We saw a significant growth in customer satisfaction and usage, reduced customer support. I think we actually had more service requests than actual users before. So now we have significantly lower service calls and overall lower TCU, total cost of ownership. And where do we go from here? Because we've had this, it's not often that an education agency at a state level actually has a success. And so this success has kind of opened the eyes for others in the government there to look at how they can leverage OpenEdX. Right now we're kind of conversations to partner with other state agencies to offer PD courses. We're working on an on-course project with UT Austin and a number of other agencies to promote workforce readiness. And the next thing that we're really looking at is to continue to improve integration between our platforms. But that's a very short picture of where we've come from. A flawed implementation, high expectations and hope, and we were able to turn that around with some strategic moves, especially the use of OpenEdX to deliver content and professional development to our teachers.
Great. Thanks, Clyde. So you said earlier that traditional LMSs are not built for scale. Can you talk a little bit more about that, maybe based on your experience with working with other LMS systems and how OpenEdX is different?
Well, I think if you look at the way that it was originally designed, they were whether it was Blackboard or even Canvas, they've had scale issues. I mean, we're looking at there's 320,000 teachers in the state of Texas, and there is a real likelihood as we start to roll out courses that we reach all 320,000 teachers. Just doing my due diligence with other learning management systems, others begin to break down. There are ways to address some of those scale issues, but they're cost prohibitive. It requires you to rethink your architecture and how you go about implementing, for scale. And we were just looking at, what is going to be the simplest and the lowest cost moving forward, and OpenEdX definitely fit the bill.
Mm-hmm. You also talked about migrating content from the old system that you're using to OpenEdX and that you used OLX. Can you talk a little bit about what that process looked like and how you streamline the process so that you've been able to move those courses quickly?
Yeah, so that wasn't easy. Partly because of, I think, the inability for OpenEdX to integrate effectively with other platforms. But we had to, since the documentation on OLX is not great, we ended up just we ended up downloading some different OLX packages from existing courses, and then we kind of did a post-mortem on what that looked like, retrofit into a transformation scheme that we have with our existing publishing system. And so now, but through that process, I wish OLX was a little bit better documented, but it does work well. And so what we do now is we convert all the published courses that are from another platform or this publishing platform. We're able to add basically a click of a button, create an OLX package, and then have that imported directly into OpenEdX. Mm-hmm. So it allows us to move quickly.
You have, what, about 70 courses on the site now?
Yeah, it's more than that. I think we're at 80.
Okay.
It's a bunch, and we've got a whole bunch in the pipeline too.
So you said that with the solution before, that you had this sort of contention between the districts wanting control of the LMS and then the state sort of mandating this more common system. Can you talk a little bit about how OpenEdX has helped alleviate or at least improve that situation of control versus collaboration?
So it doesn't completely solve some of the issues. A number of districts want control of the content. They don't want anybody else to have visibility into their teachers' performance and so on for a number of reasons. Before, they used the excuse that the platform was too difficult to use and they prefer to use their local LMS. Well, we solved that problem, and we see increased adoption from districts because that excuse is no longer valid. The OpenEdX platform is far easier to use than most of the LMSs that they currently use. What we do, though, is the same transformation scheme that we set up for transforming our content to OLX. We also transform that content to Common Cartridge, which allows local LMSs to import that content in. So we satisfy both needs. Whether it's they really want local control, we've solved that. If they just want an easier application to use, we solve that too.
So you touched on a really interesting point, which is ease of use and how that has affected adoption. Can you talk a little bit more about how that is typically undervalued and that it's oftentimes a huge barrier to adoption with other systems.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the most undervalued aspect of adoption. If you think about, if especially a large-scale implementation, you've got to reach all of your users. How do you effectively train users to use a new system? And you're looking at 320,000 potential users. The application almost has to be like commercial applications that people are already used to, that they just begin working with it and they can figure it out. Our cost of our training costs were significantly less. We didn't have to do face-to-face at the district level training them how to use the application. Training itself was part of edX, and it helped users on board far more quickly. Most of our service requests were also, can't find my way around the application. I don't know where something is. And so, it's not just the ability to reach out and bring on board a number of users, it's also keeping those users satisfied over a period of time. And the UI, edX, OpenEdX made a lot of good decisions in keeping it simple. And I really hope they continue to keep it simple as the pressures to add more and more features continue. Simplicity is absolute key for the kind of model that OpenEdX best serves.
Less is more.
Less is truly is less is more. Especially with busy folks.
So the topic of this webinar is how to scale OpenEdX, and I know there's both the technical challenges of just building the platform in a way that it can handle additional load on the servers, but can you talk about the other scaling aspects, which is how do you handle growth, right? You have all these features that are coming on, and the numbers are just going up and up and up. How does your team and how does the TDA and other people involved with the project handle that kind of growth?
A lot of running around, throwing your hands up in the air. No, we had an idea that this is the direction that we were going. We've got the support structure. I mean, if we think about the different ways to support the growth that we have, utilizing the platform for helping train users was a big part of the success. We have a support system in place. What we've found, though, even though we continue to have an increase in the number of users, our overall support volume is really low relative to the number of users that we have. So even though we have built in the ability to scale those support services, we haven't found it necessary at this time. I think what we're going to have to look at as we move forward that there are a lot of different customer types within Texas, and we're going to have to think about potentially breaking that out either into microsites or some other ways to kind of help small down the community so that it's a little bit more effective at the local level and serving all of the customer base. But at this time, we're getting as much as we can out there and getting as much adoption as we can, and then we will go back and we'll revisit the whole idea of microsites moving forward.
So what is the reaction of the TDA? I mean, coming from a system that only had 2,500 users in a 2-year period, like, what are they saying now that they're having a site that's getting close to 40,000 users?
Cautious optimism. I mean, years and years of just that's the tough thing being a state agency like that. You're not loved for much. So having a success story is I think everyone's kind of looking around like, well, that's this is new. I think for them, they see this as a way to leverage and actually offer more services. Because of the success of this, it's opened up the eyes, I think, to a number of people how it can be utilized, a cost-effective way, delivering professional development, not just for the TEA, but potentially other agencies. So I do think it's been cautious optimism and recognition that they could do more.
So you said earlier that trust was a big issue, and we know from our experience working with government agencies, state agencies, they tend to move slowly, they're very conservative. Talk to us a little bit about making the case for an open platform and how that has evolved over the years from what historically has been mostly proprietary platforms, and what was the case for encouraging them to go with an open platform like OpenEdX?
It's a great point. I don't think that there was a recognition or an understanding of some of the risks of a proprietary platform, and because it's up until a couple of years ago, it was just expected that's how you made your purchases. It was how the sales channels worked. I think there's a recognition now about ownership, and the TEA and the state really needing to own their content. They need to have a better understanding of how how can they support this for the long run. And where proprietary used to give you the false sense of security, they recognized with one or two different vendors who no longer were capable of delivering services that they were stuck. They had content they couldn't pull out, they couldn't use. For them, it was an eye-opener that moving towards open platforms is not actually a step back and kind of a long-term strategy. It's actually it's something that they have to start adopting across more and more of their platforms. So yeah, I think there was a real eye-opener that open is actually a strategic advantage for a state agency.
Yeah, and also you mentioned the content itself. It's not just the software, but I think in our conversation earlier you were talking about how the state was actually renting content and they didn't own any of the IP. So
well, that's the case. So so if the content resides, this is also something that we haven't fully fleshed out. I think as an industry is who owns what. When a state buys a textbook, but they have to update that textbook in 2 years, or are they just leasing the content? Most of this content was developed for the state, and if it's locked in a proprietary platform and they can't pull it out for whatever reason, that is it open their eyes that wait a minute, we don't necessarily own this content. There were also issues of user data and so on that they've been able to resolve. But they recognize how critical that is. It's not just the content, it's also the data about the students and owning that across the board. So, having a proprietary platform puts a state agency or someone like that at greater risk of not having that control.
Yep. I just want to remind the audience to please post your questions. I'm just going to keep peppering Clyde with questions until I see some appear on my screen. So if you've been holding back to post your question, we have a few minutes left. I want to make sure that we can get to some of the audience questions. So Clyde, one other question for you, and then we'll take some audience questions. If there's one thing you could change about Open edX, what would it be?
Yeah, I think that goes right back to the heart of I think our most difficult challenge, and that was how do we make the publishing platform for the state of Texas, which was not going to go away, how do we make sure that's interoperable with Open edX? And it took a lot of work. I do think that there are opportunities to make Open edX more interoperable, primarily like opening up an API that allows content to not just be exported but imported into Open edX. A lot of this is a kind of a philosophical approach. And Open edX is not the center of the universe for a number of kind of learning ecosystems that are out there. It's a piece of a learning system. And that kind of changes how you build your application. If you build your system to be the kind of the center of everything, the center of the world, you kind of take a particular architectural approach. If you see it as a piece of a larger ecosystem, you kind of adjust and change how you would go about building the interoperability or APIs that allow you to interact with the system more effectively. So I do think if I were to choose one thing, interoperability would definitely be it, and a dose of humility that it's just a piece in a larger puzzle.
Yeah, I would say that's something that is really important for Appsembler as well, because we're oftentimes in working with customers that have content living in another system, and how do they get that content in and out of edX? It comes up quite frequently. All right, so the questions are pouring in. Let's see, we have a question from Patrick about how much does a program like the one in Texas cost annually? I don't know if you're at liberty to say To answer that question, he says the cost on the Appsembler side as well as the cost on the manpower dedicated to the Texas program implementation. Can you give some sort of rough range of?
I can't. I'm not. A lot of the particulars of the TEA I'm not privileged to say. I can say that the costs are significantly less than traditional approaches and what's been done before. So, part of this was cost savings we were looking at.
Okay. So another question from Nishan is, we haven't really talked about the scalability, like server-wise. How does it affect the architecture, and what are the effects on the total cost of ownership?
Well, that comes into, partly I'll defer this to Nate and team. Appsembler, for us, Appsembler has been that partner to, as we start looking at, growth, working with them to determine the best architecture possible. So they've been partners with us in determining that. I can say that our roadmap is we can continue to scale and still do it in a cost-effective way moving forward. But that's something that we have a number of other applications that we're managing, and outsourcing in some way, outsourcing this some of the DevOps to Appsembler has been a real godsend for us too. And they've been great partners in the architectural conversations. Yeah,
I'll say that really what we try to do for our customers is kind of take that technical complexity away, so they don't have to think about how many servers they need or how much RAM or disk space or bandwidth. We really like our customers to be able to focus on the education aspect and not have to think about all the technical complexity of the platform. So that's really on us as a company to take care of that. We got about 1 more minute, so let's see, one last question. What happens when you scale to more than 100,000 users? How do you keep it running? What are the challenges when migrating to bigger servers? I don't know, that's again maybe more of a technical question, but what are your thoughts, Clyde, when you do move to when you get up to the 100,000, what does that affect?
Well, I think that it affects in a very positive way. It shows that the program is a success. That's our goal. Our goal is to reach as many teachers as possible. And you're going to be scaling costs as you increase usage, and we recognize that. But that's built into how we're going about with this engagement. We build in those costs. But we don't. One of the good things is that we can scale as necessary, and we've shown it so far with the kind of the growth that we've seen over the first 8 months. I don't foresee us, not being able to continue to scale as we continue the next year and the year after that. And I think 100,000 users is definitely within the realm of possibility within the next year and a half.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Clyde, for your time. It's been really great having you. And just want to remind everyone, when you leave the webinar, there's a question just asking you about what webinars you'd like to see in the future. And we welcome any and all feedback. If this webinar was beneficial for you, we want to hear that. If there's things that you wished it would have been about and it wasn't, we also would like to hear that. So please give us feedback. Thanks again, Clyde, and until next time.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you.